Hey everybody, it's Allie and welcome to our Y&R chat for Sunday, January 18th, 2015. The Kelly and Phyllis feud has been taken to a whole nother level. I, for one, am loving it. This is my favorite storyline right now. I think it's funny, it's twisted, and there's an element of mystery about it somehow too, because I don't know who's pulling all of these stunts. Clearly, one of these women is insane. In truth, probably both of them are a little bit insane, but there's been so many twists and turns throughout the week where at one point I thought, whoa, Kelly is freaking nuts, and then I twist another way and I think, whoa, Phyllis, but then I twist back. I feel at the end of all that craziness still unsure about who the real villain is here. Maybe it's a little bit of both. Maybe at the end of the day, it could be some kind of third party, or shoot, who knows, maybe neither one of them is really truly behind it. I'm not sure, but the week started out with Phyllis deciding to throw a romantic getaway for Jack in the athletic club. She set up, or she was intending to set up, kind of this tropical theme in the hotel room. Lily helped her put it together, which is kind of ironic considering Lily and Kane are the king and queens of setting up a destination vacation inside of the hotel room. They've been to Paris a few times in Genoa City. But Phyllis is wanting to set up this romantic day for her and Jack, and there's a little bit of a problem. Kelly overhears them planning this whole thing, or overhears Lily and Phyllis planning it, and the next thing you know, Jack's getting a mystery note telling him to show up in a certain room number. He goes there, finds a note that says, get undressed, put on this blindfold, and get in bed. So there's this moment that it was almost painfully awkward for me of Jack just lying there blindfolded in bed. It was weird. I'm imagining that Peter Bergman got the script or showed up on set that day and is like, really? A blindfold? But I'm 60 years old. Do we really need to do this? It was awkward for me. But on the plus side, it was entertaining. He's lying there in bed, blindfolded, and then out from the shower pops Kelly, and she is taking a rose. She's completely silent and taking a rose and wiping it on his face, and they begin to kiss, and it really only takes one kiss, and Jack realizes this is not the woman who I thought I was coming into this room to be with. And Jack is feeling stunned, like, Kelly, how could you pull a stunt like this? And Kelly is insisting that she had nothing to do with it, that I got a message that said you wanted me to come here. So Kelly's insisting she's innocent. Jack is looking at her suspiciously, of course, and and also I have to note that Kelly was even saying to Jack, why would you treat me like this? Why would you do this to me? Like, Kelly's reaction was completely genuine. Why would I call you here under false pretenses only to get my heart stomped on again? Why would I do that? And somehow, looking in her face in that moment, I did believe her, but I've gone back and forth so many different times, and of course, right on cue, Phyllis walks into the room. She's found out that Jack went to the wrong room, so she walks in, sees those two there together. Phyllis is completely ready to blow her top as Kelly's just insisting, no, it was Phyllis, and Phyllis is insisting, no, it was Kelly. I mean, Phyllis picked up a freaking vase of flowers and tried to hurl it across the room at Kelly, which I thought was also entertaining. There's good entertainment value in here, which is another reason I I love this story. But it's now Kelly's word versus Phyllis on like a completely different level of deception. Like, it's twisted. That's twisted. Whoever set that whole thing up, it has got mental problems. And I don't really, I guess the thing about this whole storyline is that I feel like either woman, both women, are completely capable of doing this. I mean, if you want to talk motive, then I think it would have to be Kelly. I think, Kelly's the one with something to gain. If you want to talk pattern of behavior, then it's Phyllis. Phyllis has a long stretch of instances where she's done horrible things to the other woman. So it's still just kind of hard for me to tell. And every time I think I know, I don't know anymore. Kelly gives Jack a business card and says, you go ahead, you call this florist and you find out who was the one who arranged to have this room, because it wasn't me. And Jack calls the florist. Not, all the flowers were ordered under the name Phyllis Newman, but then he continues to press the person on the phone, and they reveal that the person who did order them came into the store was blonde. So there's a moment of Jack and Phyllis together realizing, whoa, I mean, Kelly really went to extensive lengths to set this whole thing up. She's unstable. In fact, Jack and Phyllis were kind of bonding over it when Phyllis ended up leaving, and we saw a little shot of a blonde wig inside of Phyllis's bag. So now the implication is, wait a minute, it's Phyllis who's gone to these extensive lengths to frame Kelly for it. I mean, it was like, whoa, but I still feel questionable about that. Why would Phyllis just leave that there? If she knew what she did, why would she just leave her bag with the wig in it? Why would she even go to buy the flowers personally? That's something that you can do on the phone. Like, why? I don't know. It's elaborate either way. But Jack, before he knows anything, he's still under the impression that the woman was blonde, therefore it was Kelly. He goes and tries to have a talk with Kelly to tell her, look, you have to stop this. I see completely through what you're doing, and it has to stop now. We're not going to get back together. I'm with Phyllis. How many times do I have to tell you that? And Kelly is apparently stunned. She just looks at Jack and says, damn, the bitch is good. You know, she's one-upping me every single time. And if Kelly is telling the truth, then she is quite a victim here. She really is quite a victim of Phyllis here, which fits with her personality, because Kelly has always kind of been the victim, right? That's sort of how she's always been portrayed on the show. But I kind of like it if Kelly is actually the conniving one, because it's a little more unexpected. I personally, I would think that if Kelly was innocent, and if I was Kelly, I would let it go. I'd be like, I'm gonna stop trying to convince Jack. I'm gonna stop trying to convince everybody. I'm just gonna let this crazy woman self-destruct, and I'm gonna go about my business. Like, you know, if Kelly's truly innocent and ready to move on, then you don't need Jack. You don't need him to understand your story. Yet, at the very end of this series of this storyline for the week, Kelly is looking at her phone with a picture of Jack on it, a picture of them together, and she's saying, maybe it's not over. Maybe there is still hope for us. Kind of implying that, I mean, I guess on the surface implying that, maybe, you know, whatever Phyllis is doing is going to end up blowing up in her face. But at the same time, why is she still hanging on to that picture? I don't know. Can't seem to put my finger on it. But Jack goes back to the Abbott mansion, and sure enough, he finds that bag conveniently left on the chair with the wig in it. And the second Phyllis, you know, comes in the door, he shows it to her. He just holds up the wig and says, "What is this all about?" So I am gonna be very interested to hear what Phyllis's reaction to that is. honestly, I feel like I'm leaning toward thinking that Kelly is still doing it because I just don't see what Phyllis has to gain from all of this other than revenge, which again, pattern of behavior, Phyllis certainly has wanted to do that. The other thing I'm thinking might be a possibility is that maybe Phyllis doesn't know she's doing it. She had scheduled an appointment with her neurologist this week, and YNR made a point of noting that. So I'm almost kind of wondering, is this the evil Phyllis, the beginnings of the evil Phyllis that we were warned about? I mean, the doctors told us, you know, we can bring her back out of this coma, but she's not going to be the same person. So are we starting to see hints of truly demented and twisted, even far beyond the previous Phyllis? I kind of am feeling like I would like Billy and Victoria to get back together. By the way, what's with all of the rumors this past week that Amelia Heinel's leaving the show? I guess it was unconfirmed, so it doesn't sound like it ended up holding any water, but there was some rumor spinning around this week. Does anybody have any scoop on that to give me? I'd be really sad about that. I like her, I like Victoria, I like that she's there, and I'm starting just to see little sparks between Billy and Victoria. She saw that he was having his tattoo wedding ring removed this week, and it really clearly hurt her, or maybe it was more of just this is really over, kind of a realization, but she quickly said, oh yeah, I'm having my ring removed too. I just get the impression, and always have, that she would really like to be with Billy if Billy could have been more responsible, and Billy's really made no secret about the fact that he wanted to save the marriage. And all the while, Billy and Chelsea are getting so close, and while I do think they have a very cute relationship, I also get the impression that it's temporary. The Victoria Stitch, Billy Chelsea coupling feels temporary to me, and I thought it was interesting that Jack paid a visit to Billy this week, and Billy was actually asking Jack to become Katie's godfather, which was very nice. We know that's a role that Jack takes very seriously, but I heard Jack's warning to Billy, and it rang true with me too. Like, Jack was kind of trying to gently tell Billy, don't get too comfortable. Jack has this information that Adam is still alive. Jack knows exactly what Adam is planning, that he wants to get back together with Chelsea, and I think Jack realizes that that puts Billy's happiness in quite a lot of jeopardy. So I just don't know. I can't believe that Adam thinks, when all of this is revealed, that Chelsea is just going to welcome him back with open arms. I don't know if he thinks he's just gonna little by little make her fall in love with Gabriel and then reveal the truth. I would feel so betrayed if I were her. So I don't know that Adam is, I don't know, I don't know if he's being realistic about that. It seems a little far-fetched, but then again, it's all, you know, the whole new face thing is a little far-fetched. Billy is understandably got his radar up where Gabriel Bingham is involved. Every single time he turns around, he's there. Gabriel is trying real hard, it seems, to get up in Chelsea's life. It's unusual. It's kind of clear that the guy has a thing for her. Billy can see that. Chelsea can't quite see that. She's just trying to be friendly with him. Now, the guy's working at Jabot. There was a little scene where they're sort of at the office late night, and it's like every single time Chelsea's trying to be nice to Gabriel or does something friendly for him, Billy's right there to buck it. You know, he doesn't know. He's just got a bad feeling about this guy, and it's entirely correct. But I think every time there's a little moment of contention between Billy and Adam, it makes Adam more determined. You know, Adam realized this week that Chelsea had taken off her ring, and he's realizing that every day that goes by slimming his chances of getting back together with Chelsea. So he's putting it on pretty thick. He has somehow wormed his way into this job at Jabot, which apparently puts him into direct contact with Chelsea. Just by the way, when this all comes out, Jack is going to be so screwed. I mean, Jack knows that Adam intends to reveal the truth, so is he going to try to pretend like he didn't know about it? Billy is going to hate Jack. He's going to hate Jack. In fact, Jack's going to take a huge fall when all of this comes out. He's going to probably take at least half of it, because everyone's going to put together that he knew the truth and didn't say anything about it. Anyway, somehow Gabriel's job at Jabot puts him into direct contact with Chelsea, so he goes to visit her at her studio, the old Restless Style building, and it's kind of one of the first moments that he's had alone with his family. Chelsea had brought Connor to work that day, and there was just a brief moment where they were all three alone together, and you could almost see on Adam's face that it felt like home. This is what he's been working so hard toward for the past year. And there's also a moment where Chelsea leaves the room and Gabriel offers to watch Connor, and he immediately walks right over to Connor, shows him that he still has his little toy car that he stole last week, and he's kind of bouncing him and talking to him and calling him Peanut, and really bonding with his son. This is the first time he's had a chance to hold his son, and kids grow up quick. So Adam probably, his last time was holding him was as an infant, and now here he is holding his son growing so quickly for the first time, and it certainly was a very tender moment. Chelsea at the very end of the shows walked in on him and was like, "What are you doing? Why are you holding my son?" or something. But I'm sure that will go nowhere, of course. Yeah, I think Billy and Chelsea are doomed, but at the same time, I don't know if it's going to be Adam that's going to be what's going to be the factor that's going to pull them apart. I don't know. We'll have to see how all of that plays out. Before Adam got to the Restless Style building, I thought it was just kind of interesting and nice to see Chelsea and Sharon working together. This job is so kind of beneath Sharon. She's a big fashion model. I mean, she's had a lot of high-powered jobs, and now she's doing dress fitting with Chelsea, and Chelsea's kind of got the power. But it was nice to see the two women talking together, pretty much getting along, and Sharon was talking to Chelsea about the custody case with Nick, and Chelsea kind of encouraged Sharon to dig up some dirt on Nick. If you're going to have to go to trial over this, a lot of negative stuff is going to come out. You should be armed. So maybe you need to think about what are some unflattering things Nick might not want to put out there. And Sharon didn't want to do that. It's clear that Sharon really wants to have her family, but if she can't have her family and she's realizing that she has to fight, she might just have to do that. After Sharon leaves Chelsea, she goes to the underground to see Nick. Of course, he's there with Sage, who he's becoming very, very close with. And by the way, the whole Nick thing and Sage and Adam, I'm wondering if there's any chance Nick is going to put together the pieces on this, because it seems like he has enough to realize something's not right here. Nick was he goes over to Gabriel and Sage's house to pay condolence for Constance, and it was so inappropriate the way he was wanting to float down memory harbor with Gabe instead of being respectful of the fact that he just lost his grandmother. But he's still pushing for information, and it's Adam. I mean, he can't force this connection. He doesn't have knowledge of Nick and Gabriel's previous relationship, so it's a constant juggling act. After Nick leaves, Adam tries to push Sage to continue to talk to Nick and draw information out of him about what that relationship was like so that they can keep up the ruse, knowing that Nick is probably one of the only people now who has the biggest chance of exposing the truth. I just don't know if he's going to do it. Sage is very, very happy, I think, to go continue to talk to Nick. It's odd because she goes to the underground and she's asking him questions about Gabe, and it's clear that she's trying to CYA. She's trying to cover her own butt. And at the same time, I think maybe she does like Nick. I think they are developing a little bit of a relationship there. And there was some implication of that this week. Victoria asking Nick of how he feels about her. And Nick is not wanting to rush to get into any kind of relationship. And clearly she isn't either. But there's a little bit of a friendship developing there. And I don't want to believe that it's all about keeping the secret. I kind of think Sage has got some good girl in her still. I don't think she's all bad or all good. I think she's a little bit of a mix. Now, she's at the underground when Sharon arrives to talk to Nick about this custody case, and she clearly wasn't happy, and Sharon was not happy to see Sage there. Sharon was wearing this beautiful wine-colored coat. I just loved the cut of it. She looked so good this week. She looked good in the dress she was modeling. She looked good in the coat. I'm feeling Sharon and the fashion as always. But I think this is the second time Sharon has seen Nick with Sage, and I think Sharon is looking a little bit jealous. And if the Chelsea-Sharon rivalry is now over and they're becoming friends, maybe YNR is gonna fit Sharon with a brand new rival in Sage. I don't know. Doesn't Sharon have enough rivals though? I'm all over the place today, but there was a few scenes this week that were implying that Victoria has the intention of spying on Jabot, and that just perhaps she's going to use Stitch to do it. And that's kind of another reason why I wonder if that relationship is going to implode on its own with or without the Adam factor, for this foursome. Ashley is on to Victoria and is trying to mention it to Stitch without seeming jealous because they slept together and that's their big secret, which is another reason that relationship could blow up. But Ashley told Stitch this week, be aware, Victoria is on Victor's side. They want this information. Newman Enterprises is flailing, and that seems to be public knowledge, so I'm sure that Victor would love to have this formula that could make him super, super rich. And Ashley even said as much. Victor wants something that I have, and you don't know how Victoria acts in business. I've been around her. I've known her for a long, long time. You don't know how she works, but I'm telling you, she's snooping around. And there's no reason for Victoria to be in that lab at all. I mean, Victoria was in there talking to both Stitch and Ashley this week, and I thought, what business do you have being there? I wouldn't let her in the door. I'm surprised that she was allowed in. And the more Victoria acts innocent about it, the more suspicious I become. And it's funny because last week I noticed and didn't mention that Victor kind of planted the seed with Victoria last week. They were sitting in his office goo-goo gaga-ing over Katie, and Victor just ever so subtly mentioned to Victoria something about maybe you could, talk to Stitch and get a little information. It was very, very subtle, and Victoria blew him off immediately. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna spy for you. But the seed was planted, and I just think it's I don't know, it's gonna end up happening. Plus, the other thing I also didn't mention was the fact that Abby stole a little bit of the love potion, and she's been looking curious walking around town with her, or she's been seeming like she's gonna do something with it. I don't know what. I don't know if she's planning to use it for herself or knowing that Abby is a big fan of Billy and Victoria and wants them to be back together. I wonder if she's gonna somehow use the love potion for Victoria and Billy. Either way, I don't see Victoria and Stitch lasting. Stitch has got the big secret. Victoria also wants to know a secret about the business, and there's the Victor factor. I just think whether Victoria wants to or not, she is hardwired to please Daddy. Avery and Dylan were successful in putting the sale of the warehouse district on hold. Apparently Victor has lost this round, lost this battle. He has absolutely no intentions of losing the war. It seems like Victor, his enemies are at the gate, and he's trying real hard to fend them all off. He's trying to save his company and keep it solvent, yet at the same time, now not being able to sell the warehouse district has really ticked him off, and he has decided to pull out his favorite, most trusted way to solve a problem: cash. Victor, after learning that he's not going to get what he wants, he goes to the coffee house to talk to Dylan. After they had that really nasty blow up in public last week, no love lost between these two guys. But Victor hands him a note and says there's a figure on it that he will give him, an amount of money which will allow him to relocate Crimson Lights to anywhere in the town that he wants. And of course, Dylan's not going to take that money. Dylan is proud, and not only that, but it's become personal now for both of them. I had hoped that maybe, I must have been crazy, but I had hoped that Victor would accept Dylan, mainly because it would be respectful to Nikki. The two guys don't have to be best friends and enjoy every single family get-together together, but at least tolerate each other and not develop an enemy relationship, at least for Nikki. And I think Dylan has done a better job of trying to keep that peace, certainly, than Victor. It feels all out like war between them now, and Victor doesn't know how to do anything gently or subtly. When Dylan turns down his money, Victor was he was threatening. He said something to Dylan about, you might not want to pursue this. You might he said something about Avery's, your girlfriend's law practice might end up getting hurt over this or something. He said something threatening, that, or at least that Dylan also perceived as being threatening toward Avery. The next thing you freaking know, Dylan is alone in the coffee house. He looks over his shoulder and there's two black masked robbers standing there. I was like, oh no, please, no, please, please, no. I cannot handle it if this is Victor's doing. It's too dark. It's too much. I don't want Victor to be this mob boss. There was just something, I cannot believe that Victor would do that. And all of a sudden the guys start saying to Dylan, give us your money, or give us the money out of the register. And like Dylan went to go pretend like he was gonna grab the cash and give it to him, and instead he totally takes on these two guys. He starts punching them, and it was this very choreographed fight scene, which I can appreciate because obviously they put a lot of YNR put a lot of time into that. That can't be easy to kind of pull it off, but these two guys ended up ganging up on Dylan. It was an all-out brawl, but I thought immediately, wait a minute, these guys aren't armed? They had no guns or nothing. It just turned into a three-dude fight, and while Dylan was kind of fighting one, the other one was standing off waiting to jump in. It was a little bit weird. It was a little bit off. Who robs without a gun or something, or a knife or something? Typically, like, I guess they just thought they were gonna gang up on him. I don't know, and I can't imagine what Dylan was thinking. just not giving them the money. I mean, he gets his butt kicked pretty much, and he's lucky that he didn't get killed. He's beat up, he's on the floor, he's bleeding, and Avery comes in and she finds him and gets him to the hospital where Dylan has a concussion now, and everybody's worried about him, including Nikki and Paul. And who do you think is going to end up taking the blame for it? It's going to be Victor. Immediately, Paul goes to Victor to confront him. Not pretty at all. And Nikki's still in the hospital with Dylan saying, you should be afraid of Victor. You should be afraid of him. I don't know how she could say that about her husband. I just don't think it would be Victor's style in any way, shape, or form. In fact, in the preview of next week's shows, Victor is calling Joe into his office and saying, how could you do something like that without telling me? Victor is essentially accusing Joe of hiring those two guys, which I think proves that Victor didn't know anything about it. Avery is the other person who is suggesting that maybe Joe was behind it. I know other people didn't really feel this way, but I just felt last week that there was something about Joe that could be dangerous. I got a kind of a weird vibe. I would think that Joe had nothing to do with it. But then also from the preview of next week's shows, I guess Dylan he's out of the hospital and he's starting to get threatening phone calls. So it's an ongoing thing. So I guess it wasn't an isolated incident. It wasn't just a robbing incident. Apparently somebody really does have it out for him. And if it's not Victor, then it has to be Joe, or who else could it be, or somebody else associated with this whole warehouse deal. I don't know. I don't want to believe that it's Victor, and I don't want to believe that it's Joe either. It was weird though that Avery comes to confront Joe about it and ask, saying, how could you do this? She's accusing him, and in response, Joe kisses her. He even said something like, I know something that'll make this better, and then he goes in with his lips, and I'm like, well, what could he be thinking? Avery was devastated. She just walked in and found her fiance on the floor, bloody and beaten and unconscious. And he thinks that kissing her is going to solve that. She doesn't trust Joe, and he knows that she doesn't trust him. So his motives seem off to me too. I'm wondering if YNR has brought Joe in just as a sexy short-term villain. I think it's a good possibility. Maybe he did do this. There's so many, it kind of feels a little bit like the Phyllis and Kelly thing to me right now, that I don't really know who's behind any of it, and I don't want to believe that anybody is. On a side note, Joe hired Austin, which also seems a little bit weird. He's hired him to make some kind of video for his real estate firm, and Avery found out about it, by the way, and she said, we can, whatever, this was before the beating, but Avery said, you know what, I'm fine with it, let Austin work with Joe. I loved her jab though. She took Austin aside and said, on this next job, try not to take any hostages. I loved that because it seems like YNR has very conveniently covered over Austin's past, so I liked that she said that. Also, Kane seemed to express a little bit of distrust with Joe. He kind of confronts him about, well, why didn't you tell me that Victor was behind this whole warehouse deal? We've been talking about it for months. I've been helping you and you never mentioned it. So Joe tries to talk his way out of it, and does successfully, kind of saying, well, it wasn't my place. But Kane now has a vested interest. He wants to take he wants to take Chancellor away from Victor. Kane is in full-on enemy mode where it comes to that. He knows what he wants, and Chancellor Industry is it. And he's even telling Joe, well, I could just start supporting Dylan and make sure that Victor's not able to raise additional funds to save Newman Enterprises, which might force him to sell Chancellor Industries. That would be in my best interest. And of course, he's laying out this whole plan as Victor walks in, and here's Kane talking. So there's also being set up for a Kane versus Victor feud. Victor's really getting it from all angles. He's made no friends in this town. There's not one, is there one single person in this town, I guess, besides Victoria, who can even stand Victor at this point? I am looking forward to the Kane and Victor feud. And Kane, after Victor left, no. Before Victor even got there, Kane said something to Joe like, look, I'll continue to work with you, but I'm going to need you to give me information about Victor. So I think Kane is going to be integral in maybe getting that. I'm looking forward to seeing him get Chancellor Industries back, or to see that feud that he's working on, or to see that project he's working on with Jill. I am kind of liking seeing Kane in business mode as well during the confrontation with Victor. Kane, did you guys notice that even like twice that Victor and Kane are going at it, yelling at each other, and when it's all over, Kane just looks at Victor and says, yeah, have a good day. It was such a Victor move. That's Victor's classic move. He will tell you off and then be like, you have a good day. And Kane did it too. I was like, woo, Kane is impressing me now. He's taking on the big man and telling him to have a good day. I do think it's about time for Michael to start telling his family. I understand that he doesn't want to announce that he has cancer. He doesn't want all of the pity. And I think that in a way, when I'm putting myself in his shoes, but in a way, when you tell someone that you have cancer, there's a level of comforting that you have to do for them that I'm sure would be exhausting and draining. And Michael and Lauren made the decision this week to go ahead and tell their best friends, Paul and Chris, but it was kind of hard when Paul and Chris also had news that was happy. Paul and Chris told Michael and Lauren that they're pregnant and they're going to be having a baby, and so it was hard for them to want to spoil that, and they didn't. They chose to keep that a secret. But later in the week, Michael was at his doctor's appointment, and they're telling him that his treatment is going to be starting tomorrow, and there was this look on his face almost of realizing or feeling like this was his last day as himself or as a man. It's quite clear that he's worried that he's going to lose his manhood throughout this treatment and that Lauren's going to leave him. He's at the hospital talking to the nurse, and she mentions about his oncologist with the door wide open, and Phyllis walks by and says, "Your oncologist? What's going on?" And Michael has to admit and tell her that he has prostate cancer. And again, it was kind of as I was saying before, Michael had to comfort Phyllis. And I'm sure that is, that's difficult because this is something you are going through personally, and you have to help other people with it too. I'm sure that's you don't want to hurt the ones you love. And I think maybe he saw that as not telling the ones he loved as saving them. But Phyllis is very offended at first, of course, because it's all about Phyllis, and she's mad that he didn't tell her. But he sits her down and he talks her through it, but also opens up a little bit about his insecurity. And he says, I'm not going to be able to be a husband to Lauren in all of the ways that I want to be, and he even mentioned Carmine's name, so it's clear he's feeling insecure about his marriage and worried that Lauren will not stand by him, or stay with him, I should say. So this week, Devon totally slept with Gwen, which I think they'd have a good chemistry. I think that they'd have a good relationship. But on second thought, I hate to see Gwen get used, because that's exactly what's happening. Devon and Gwen are downstairs basking in the morning afterglow in public as Hillary and Neil are having breakfast, and Hillary sees them together and she's obviously very upset, and she goes over and she ends up creating a distraction. She has a private moment with Devon, realizing that he's now cheated on her while she's cheating on him while cheating on Neil. And it's so ridiculous to me that she was mad at him about it. It's ridiculous to me that he slept with another woman to get back at her. She had to explain to him that, wait, you slept with Gwen because you heard that I was trying to work on having a baby with your father. This is so twisted. And she says to him, no, that's not the case. I've been lying to Neil. How could you even question my commitment to you? It's so insane to me. I don't know how these two people can even, why would you want to be with someone when you're building a relationship starting out on a lie? First of all, the whole "is she having a baby with Neil" question should have been something Devon asked her from the beginning, but there's no honesty in that relationship at all. It's amazing that they can even keep their lies straight. It's lies on top of lies on top of lies on top of lies. And she tells Devon, no, not having a baby with your father. And if I was having a baby, I would want it to be with you. Well, what am I supposed to feel here as the viewer? Am I supposed to feel like Devon and Hillary are the star-crossed lovers? Am I supposed to go, oh, she wants her baby to be with Devon? Because I don't feel that way. I think everything in your lives, Devon and Hillary, are telling you, everything is telling you that this is wrong. How many more signs do you need to know that it's wrong? You need to drop this relationship now. And Hillary, for crying out loud, you didn't have to be Neil's wife to help him through the blindness. You just could have been honest with, I don't know. It's just, it is such a mess. All the way around. Neil's gonna find out one way or another. They cannot possibly think that they're gonna continue to keep this secret. Neil, while Hillary and Devon are having this little argument, Neil is back at the table talking with Gwen, and Gwen even told him the truth about the beginning of her relationship with Devon, that it was a lie, that they were faking it, so that she's, in her mind, it's so that the family wouldn't worry about him. But Gwen is totally into Devon now. She even talked to Hillary about it. Oh yeah, we're a real couple. I mean, they did it more than once, of course. Devon's moving on. I mean, Gwen completely has taken their relationship, even though it's clear that Devon is not giving her anything. In Gwen's mind, it's the real thing. This is her man. This is the future. And she's going around trying to make nicey nice with Hillary and with Neil and telling him the real truth. So there's a lie. That should have been a red flag for Neil. Hillary's phone rings, and he goes into her bag to get the phone, which he shouldn't have done anyway. What's he gonna do? See who it is? He does have a history, though, of seeing her phone. But he goes into the bag and he finds her birth control pills. Of course, he has to bring them up to his head and shake them around and listen to see if that's what they are. And she's still talking to Devon. They're deciding that maybe they should have a getaway, like a spa getaway, to enjoy some alone time together. It's just, again, more lies, more I cannot believe they think they're going to continue to get away with this. But she comes back to the table. Neil has found her birth control pills. I'm waiting for her to say, oh no, those aren't birth control pills. That's Chiclets. That's my gum. Just another lie. It's all it is. But she does admit that they are, she says that they're the pills that she keeps in her purse, but she also tells him that she's not ready, or she doesn't feel ready, or she's not sure about having a baby with him. How hard was that? Is saving Neil giving him everything he wants? Is that what the solution to all of this is? You just continue to lead him down this path further and further of the happy family and the happy couple, that's helping him? She's talking to, I guess she was sitting with Devon or something later. And she told Neil about this, maybe I should just get away and go to the spa. Why would you tell Neil the exact spa you're going to be at for an affair? Why wouldn't you say I'm going to some other spa? Because she could just go off to the spa vacation and Neil could show up there, and then Lily comes in, hears her talking about it, and says, hey, maybe, spa, that sounds good. Maybe I should go with you. I had to laugh at that moment because anything to thwart these ridiculous lies is completely okay with me. Okay, you guys, I'm gonna cut it a little bit short today. I feel like I might be coming down with something. I kind of want to just go take a nap. But I love Y&R. I love you guys, and I hope you keep your comments coming. You can call into my voicemail at area code 309-588-4569. You can go to YouTube, leave a comment. You can go to yrchat.com and leave a comment. You can go to Facebook and Twitter and all that. I'm totally appreciating all of your feedback, and I'll be back next week, hopefully a little bit more energy. All right, you guys, I love ya. Have a good week. Bye.